I didn't think much about that at the time. My sons were grown and in their 20s, and I had wanted to leave my marriage for a decade or more, and I didn't because I waited for the kids to grow up. I should have thought more about them, but I didn't.
Toby Dorr is talking about the love affair that altered her life 20 years ago and captured the nation's attention.
I think it was true love. I really do. He would have never stayed in touch with me all these years later, I don't think, and I believe he loved me. I know I loved him, and I will always feel that way. I don't feel like I was manipulated any more than like I could manipulate my husband now to go make me a sandwich if I was really hungry and I didn't want to get up,
Toby, then known as Toby Young, helped her lover, John Manard, an inmate at Lansing Correctional Facility in Kansas who was serving life for felony murder, escape. Toby, a married mom of two, was a volunteer at the prison where she helped inmates train dogs that would be put up for adoption. During her final 3 months volunteering at the prison, she and John began an affair which led to her helping him escape in a dog crate.
On February 12, 2006, the plan was that I would drive into the prison for a normal dog adoption. And so to do that, I was allowed to drive in through the back of the prison. There's a series of 3 gates. You drive through 2 of them, and only one gate opens, and then you get in, and then that gate closes and the next gate opens, and it kind of leads you in. The 3rd gate separates vehicles from the inmate area of the prison. My dog handlers were all lined up there with their dogs. I was allowed to come in, and they would load the dogs in my van, so I didn't have to walk them all out through the prison. It would have taken me 5 or 6 trips. I knew that John was going to come. He was going to be hidden inside a box inside a dog crate so nobody would see him.
Now, one of their most dangerous prisoners has used the dog training program to escape. And incredibly, this 48-year-old mother of 2 allegedly helped him. John Manard, 27, is a cold-blooded killer, serving life for a murder he committed as a teenager. Authorities say Toby Young smuggled Manard out of the prison, curled up in a dog cage like this one. Other inmates loaded it into her van. There are about 8 watchtowers here at Lansing Correctional Facility, and the question is, how is it that no one saw John Manard get into a dog crate and no one saw Toby Young drive him to freedom right through the security gate?
John, who was serving a life sentence for first-degree felony murder, escaped with his lover.
I never thought of John as a murderer. He had never killed anyone. He was always in trouble as a kid. He was always getting in trouble. He just was going down the wrong path. And he always said, I needed to go to prison. Prison's where I belong, but I never needed to be here for life, which, I agree. I kind of felt like maybe I was righting a wrong in a weird way.
Prison spokesman Bill Miskell told me the escape was well planned. It was more than 5 hours before authorities realized what had happened.
She withdrew cash in excess of $10,000 from the bank, and there are 2 weapons that are missing from Toby Young's home.
The saga has stunned Toby's family, including her fireman husband and her 2 grown-up children.
So Toby, if you hear this, please come home.
The couple were on the lam, and after spending time in a cabin, they were driving on a Tennessee highway when they got caught.
It was the most dramatic event of my life. It was like an out-of-body experience, really. I mean, we were driving down the interstate, and it was close to midnight, and it's in Tennessee, in the middle of nowhere. It's dark, and I see all these lights up ahead. You can see the glow on the horizon. And I'm thinking, what could there be so much light on this highway? I'm curious, and so I'm looking out the side window, and as we pass an entrance ramp, I notice that there's police cars blocking the entrance, so cars aren't being allowed on the highway. And I said to John, wow, there must be a bad accident up ahead. You better be careful. And he said, Toby, there's no accident. This is all for us. And then I turned and looked out the front window, and the whole highway was just a sea of police cars. And the bright light I saw was a helicopter.
The couple tried to escape, but were eventually caught after their vehicle crashed. When they were arrested, it was the last time she would see John for years.
The thing is, when John went to prison, there was no internet, there was no cell phones, there were no traffic cameras. He thought if we went to another state, nobody'd know anything about us. I think I knew that it wasn't going to last forever, but I needed to break away from my life. You know, I had expressed being unhappy for quite a while, and nobody listened to me, and I felt like if I was going to make a change in my life, it would have to be something so dramatic that there could be no question.
Telling his story for the first time. In a letter to a TV station, John Manard, who was caught after 2 weeks on the run, describes 48-year-old mom Toby Young as an angel. Our story is a love story. Everyone is trying to turn it into something bad. People have been trying to crucify an angel, he writes.
When the duo was arrested, John tried to tell authorities that Toby had nothing to do with his escape, and she was innocent.
I wasn't surprised. I knew he would do that. He had told me, you know, that he wouldn't let me get in trouble, which was ridiculous. Of course I was going to get in trouble, but, you know, he said she didn't know, and I've always said I knew, I was involved. I wasn't gonna cover up, so I owned up to my part.
John was sent back to prison, and Toby was sentenced to 27 months after she pled guilty to aiding and abetting aggravated escape and introducing contraband to the prison. She served her state and federal sentences concurrently. While awaiting her sentence, her husband filed for divorce. Her kids stopped speaking to her, and she lost contact with John. But the most devastating news of all was she lost her father to cancer.
My dad came to visit me in jail several times before he died, and once just a few days before he died, and he was really, really, really sick. I felt like I needed to be there. My dad meant the world to me. And I think that's part of the reason I ran away. I didn't think I could deal with him dying. I ran away from that too. There were a lot of things I think that stacked on top of each other that led to this. It wasn't just my marriage or, you know, it was not any one thing. It was a culmination of quite a few things. And the strange thing is, when I was out for my dad's funeral, I was out for 48 hours. I was ready to go back. I was ready to go back because I felt safe and sheltered inside the jail. And this world out here was just crazy with reporters and people and busyness. And it just, I needed to get away. I needed to go back in my shell. I got my divorce finalized the day before my sentencing. It all happened within 2 months, all this stuff. The biggest worst thing about prison is the food. The food is terrible, and it is just calories. And I gained 40 pounds in prison, and I haven't lost it. You know, there is no fresh fruit. There is no fruit. You will not have any fruit. There's no vegetables. You might get some mashed potatoes, but you know, it's just calories. It's just bread and butter and pasta. The second hardest thing was not being able to hug my mother. So many visits she came were behind glass, and people need hugs. I mean, it's just part of life. It's part of us as social animals, and that being, you know, kept behind a glass wall, that was just so difficult.
After serving her time, she was able to hug her mother, but the grim news was that her young son was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma and died within a year of her release.
I went to the hospital when he died, and I kind of had to force my way in, but I was there. And my surviving son, we've tried on and off to have a relationship, but, you know, it's just, I think he feels he owes some loyalty to his father, and that's kind of the way his dad wants it to be. So that's what it is.
Since her release, Toby has started a new life. She was granted permission from both the federal and state parole boards to take a job in Boston, where she met a man named Toby Dorr. The two started off as co-workers, then roommates, and eventually became a couple. They left Boston and relocated to Kansas and got married to be closer to Toby's family. Now they live with Chris's family in Virginia. She also managed to reconnect with John Manard.
The great news is my husband has a son, and I'm grandmother to their kids. And actually, we live with them. We all share a big house here outside Washington, D.C. We have our own apartment built into their house. So, God gave me a family. He took one away, but he gave me another one. So, I still feel the loss of my son and his children, but I don't feel empty. My husband is awesome. He just really is. John would call me for a few months from prison, and then he'd just kind of drift off, and I might not hear from him for a year or two. And then he'd call again, and Chris never minded. He's like, he needs a friend, you be his friend.
In August 2024, John Manard died in prison from an overdose of fentanyl. While authorities and John's family says it was an accidental overdose, Toby feels otherwise.
I suspect it was intentional, but that's just my opinion, and that's just looking back over our conversations for the previous 4 or 5 months before that. His death is ruled, I think it's accidental or something, and his family believes it was an accident. I was stunned because my husband and I had started a podcast to talk about felony murder. And actually, John was going to be on the podcast on a Monday. It was August 26th. We were going to call him he was going to call us at 6:30, and we were going to record him for the podcast. And the day before that Sunday, August 25th, I got a message that he'd been found unresponsive in his cell. So it was just devastating.
Following his passing, the female companion John was with before his death arranged for Toby to get some of his possessions, like the Bible she gave him, a lock of his hair, and his ashes.
Sitting on my desk here, these are some of John's ashes. I have about a third of his ashes. John had a girlfriend in Arizona, and she was the one that the prison notified when they found him unresponsive, and she took care of all the arrangements and sent me a portion of his ashes, and she kept some, and then she sent some to his sister in Kansas City. So he's kind of split between the three of us. And so John sits here on the corner of my desk, and here's the red Bible I sent him in prison, and she sent me that back as well. So I have those two things from John.
Finally free and never more going back to prison.
Toby has kept busy writing and reissuing her book, Living with Conviction, which is about her time in prison as well as advocating for prison reform through her foundations.
I feel so passionate about it, and there's such a need out there. There are so many things that are broken in our country when it comes to criminal justice. Fierce Grace is just an organization that is a safe space for women to share their stories. And I hope to be able to put on some seminars and some workshops. Right now, it's just a collection of books and a blog and a newsletter and a space for women to connect.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Sal Bono.